Hello everyone, I'm Andrew Olazaga, here to welcome you to another episode of the DUBCAST with Dubside.
And I'm Dubside, and we're up to DUBCAST number 5.
Yeah. I wanted to mention this because in DUBCAST number 5 you mentioned skydiving as an analogy to rolling.
Yes, skydiving, as you will hear, relates in some way to rolling. You can hear me talk about that. But it's when we talk about skydiving, it's actually interesting that there's a very well-known sea kayaker who used to be a skydiver, and that would be Freya Hoffmeister from Germany, who, as I understand, she took skydiving to great lengths, as she tends to do with things. And then when she had a son, the story goes that she wanted to do something that wasn't quite as dangerous, so she decided to take up kayaking.
You know, she's probably the most accomplished sea kayaker in history, having circumnavigated Australia and South America. And now she's working on paddling around North America. Mm-hmm. Do you know there was a little article that she wrote about you in her blog?
Really?
Yeah.
I haven't seen that.
She used to have this blog called Kayak Underground, kayak spelled the Greenlandic way with a Q.
Okay.
But now it's, for those who are interested, FreyaHoffmeister.com. And it's Freya Hoffmeister, Goddess of Love to the Seas. Mm-hmm. And the title of the article is Dubside, My Black Brother.
Back in the day, she used to call me her black brother because she preferred to wear the color black and I preferred to wear the color black. So we sort of made an interesting combination. She was wearing that reed gear which is form fitted to your body.
Oh, okay. So let me read you this article. You can't believe it. Dubside, my black brother and web phantom, has a website, but still no email. He's an amazing sportsman and must be made out of steel. No, not his hair. I think it's funny when his long rasta locks are slipping out of the bottom of the legs of his pants. Smiley face. Or when, as at Sweetwater's, all teachers were supposed to wear the light grayish teacher's shirt at the meeting. Dubside's shirt was peeping just an inch out under his black jacket, only opened carefully under cover. Smiley face. He's funny, that man.
Yeah, I remember that. That was at the Sweetwater Festival in Florida, and they had they made up these nice polo shirts with a collar, and it was nice where they had the British flag, the American flag, and the Greenland flag up across the top with the logo underneath it. And we were told, we should put those on, but it wasn't black. So with my de rigueur black jumpsuit, I put it under the jumpsuit and just pulled the zipper down enough so you could see the little flags off the side there. and she noticed that I had it just stuck a little piece of it under my other thing, and she thought it was pretty funny.
I remember we were talking about Greg Stamer, and I made the mistake of saying that he did his Iceland circumnavigation solo, but you said that he actually did it with Freya Hoffmeister.
Yes, as I recall, they did that together, and they gave a talk about it at Delmarva. That was quite the talk because we heard all the gossipy details about how their relationship was breaking up in the middle of that trip. As Greg relates it. In the morning, they would get up when they're on this expedition. So they're camping every night and then paddling all day and then camping. And so you want to paddle early in the morning because the weather, the winds usually haven't kicked up. So it's trying to get the tent down in a hurry. So he's taking the tent pegs out going in one direction, and she's taking the tent pegs out in the other direction. And they meet, and she says, "Greg, you have only 3 tent pegs and I have 5. What is wrong with you?" So everything's a competition for her.
I think she really admired you.
Well, she was, I don't know. I suppose so.
Welcome once again to the DUBCAST with Dubside. This is DUBCAST number 5. This episode is about training for rolling in competition and rolling in very, very cold water. I'll discuss some of the things I wear for very cold water. And I'll mention a guy named Moulton Avery. I'll also talk a little bit about seal hunters. And I have some more Greenlandic music. All right, here we go. The way I see it, rolling a kayak can be thought of as analogous to skydiving. Both these activities started out as rescue techniques in case of an emergency, but evolved into a sport because the people that started doing it realized how much fun it was. For skydivers, the whole reason to go up in an airplane is so that you can jump out of it. And for rolling fanatics, the whole reason to get into a kayak is so you can tip it over on purpose. Just as there are organized skydiving competitions, there are organized rolling competitions. The largest and longest running one takes place every year in Greenland at the National Kayak Championships. They started doing this in Greenland in the 1980s, and in the year 2000 they opened it up to foreign competitors. If you've had a chance to look at my Modern Greenland Kayaking DVD online, you can see what it's like in competition. I have some footage in there. And at this point, plenty of other people have been to Greenland over the years with their cameras and posted their own footage of the competition. That allows anyone to get a sense of what the competition is like without having to go all the way to Greenland. Well, leading up to 2004, I had visions of going to Greenland myself, and like any fanatical competitor, I was practicing, learning as many of the 35 different maneuvers as I could, trying to learn them on both sides, and trying to learn the names of the maneuvers in Greenlandic, and also trying to memorize the order that they're done in so that I wouldn't have to wait for the judge to call them out, and practicing on a regular basis. In Philadelphia, in between the winter pool sessions, I was going outdoors to the Delaware River to practice as November turned into December and into January, where the temperature dropped below freezing. Let me say something of a cautionary nature about cold water. Actually, everything you need to know about cold water is on the website coldwatersafety.org. And that is run by a friend of mine named Moulton Avery. And Moulton has a history of kayak going way back. He went to that Delmarva Paddlers Retreat event I told you about before, back in the early 90s, way back when. And Moulton is one of those offbeat characters with his own eccentricities, just like me. He's a good friend of mine, and he is an authority on cold water. And I will just briefly say that the danger for manual-powered boaters and cold water occurs when someone gets a brand new kayak, and you get those days in, say, the end of March when the first thaw hits, and the temperature might jump up to 60, say 70 degrees, a beautiful day, the spring is in the air, and one wants to go take their kayak out, or whatever boat they have, and goes out in their t-shirt and jeans because it's such a warm day. That can lead to pure disaster. No matter how well you think you can swim, put yourself in t-shirt and jeans in 40-degree water, and that's a whole different situation. In kayaking, we use wetsuits or dry suits to buy more time against the onset of hypothermia. Coldwatersafety.org has all the details on that. For Greenland Rolling competition, you have 35 different maneuvers, and in 2004 it was actually only 30 back then. They start off with the simple stuff that's 2 points each, standard Greenland roll, kingolfik bashashlu nofashashlugu, 2 points on a side, and you add a little complexity to it, they go up to 3-point rolls. When you get up to rolling with the throwing stick, the norsok, those are 6 points each. There's 6 different ways to do that. The hand roll is done forwards, backwards, and there's 6 different maneuvers there. That's 7 points each. That would be a total of 6 times 7 is 42 points for just the hand rolls. You move up to just rolling with a fist. Those are 8 points. You hold a brick in your hand. Those are 9 points. There's one done with just your elbow is 10 points. So the total possible points, maximum possible number of points is, back then it was somewhat under 300, the high 200 point range. Looking at my logbook from back then, I see that on October 27th, 2003, I went out and did all the rolls I could on the list in order and added up the points and got 121, which is a decent intermediate score, but I was aiming for a lot higher than that. Heading into November, I see that I was encountering the police or the Coast Guard more often, and that's because when the temperature's in the 40s and people see a kayak flipped over from their car, they call 911. This was happening often enough that it got to where the park police in New Jersey and the Coast Guard in the Delaware were asking me to call them ahead of time so they know I'd be out there. Well, complying with that was easier said than done. I didn't have a cell phone. Actually, I still don't have a cell phone. But didn't I say I was not exactly Mr. Normal? Back then, there were payphones around, so I tried to do it that way. Into November, I'm still practicing. A little warm spell there. Got up to 50 degrees. Some days actually hit 60 degrees near Thanksgiving. I got the elbow roll to work. Ikuzanak pukusuk patishlugu for the first time. 10 points per side. And then I actually cracked 200 points, scoring myself. That was a big breakthrough for that day. Early December 2003, temperature in the 30s. Now let me explain that to go kayaking to my usual rolling spot, the main one, it involves, I walk about a block and a half to get to where the trolleys come. Take a trolley to the subway. This is going through Center City, Philadelphia. And then the subway stop takes me to a bus stop, and then a bus takes me to where I can get to the water. And I found that rather than taking a dry set of clothes to change into, it worked better to just wear what I was going to wear the whole time, a dry suit with insulating fleece and things underneath it, because if I have dry clothes, where am I going to change into them? I don't have a car. Additionally, I don't have the use of the trunk of a car to put all sorts of extra things into. I have to carry everything I'm taking. And I was using the pack that the feathercraft would go into on wheels to drag it along, but putting in the PFD and the paddle and dry bags and things, the space was at a premium. So it worked out better to get all bundled up, get to the water, and then put on the Tuilik on top of whatever I had, on top of my dry suit. And then the PFD goes on top of that, and some gloves or mittens if it's really cold. Go paddling, and then get off, take off the PFD and the Tuilik, and then go find the bus to the trolley come back home. The colder the air temperature got, the more insulation I would put on under the dry suit. On December 2nd, with the air temperature in the 30s, I got bundled up, I went outside, and as soon as I got to the main street, the trolley came. I did not get on the trolley, deliberately, because I had so much on. If I got on the heated trolley right away, I'd be sweating. I needed 15 or 20 minutes in the 30-degree air to just reach equilibrium so that I wouldn't overheat. That's how much I was wearing. And the logbook here has end of December, early January, bit of a warm spell, hidden 40s and 50s, lots of good practicing there. Second week of January, cold spell hits. January 7th, headed out for the Delaware River. Air temperature, high 20s, windy. So I go out walking towards the water on the street, and a street cop stops me. Guess I looked a little suspicious. Wanted to know what was with the bag and this long object, two-piece paddle wrapped in nylon, but looked suspicious from a distance. So I explained to the officer, I'm going kayaking, this is a paddle I have, this is a folding kayak in this big bag here. Officer says, "You kayak in this weather?" I said, "Yeah." Now, to get salt water to freeze, you have to go pretty far below 32. But the Delaware River at Philadelphia is not salt water. So at 32, it turns to ice. At 20 degrees, the river is not going to freeze right away. But if you splash some of the river on your kayak or your paddle or your gloves, it will freeze right away. As I said, I did this on public transportation to get to the water, not with a car. And in that kind of air temperature, when I come off the water, I have to take the kayak apart quickly because the little bit of water that gets into the kayak from rolling so much will freeze and can freeze the parts of the kayak, the frame, into the skin, and I can't take the kayak apart if I don't hurry up. And if I can't take the kayak apart, I can't get it onto the bus, subway, and trolley, and I can't get home. The two-piece paddle that I have always freezes at the center, right at the join, because the water's splashing over it as I paddle. So I bring a reusable hand warmer, activate that, wrap it around the paddle shaft to melt the paddle, to take the paddle apart, because it would be awkward to take a 7.5-foot paddle on a bus. Awkward at best. January 8th, 4th day in a row. Temperature still in the 20s. Tried to call the Coast Guard to notify them. Payphone ate my dime. Didn't have any more change. Went out anyway. Went through the rolling list. Scored myself at 204 points. Not a bad day. Weekend comes. Pool sessions. Practice rolling indoors. What luxury. Weekday comes back January 13th. Windy, but the temperature was in the 40s. And my notes here say I was overdressed. Had too much on. Couldn't do the whole rolling list. Too hot. Now, before I go any further, let me advise you, let me command you, do not do this yourself. Okay? Neither I nor Andrew nor my friend Moulton or anybody else involved in this production is responsible for any mishaps that may occur on your part should you attempt anything I describe here. Okay? We got that out of the way? All right. January 23rd, 2004, having kept track of how many times I've gone out, this is my 552nd time out with a folding kayak. So clearly out of the beginner status. Okay. Delaware River, putting in at Penn Treaty Park. Wind 20 to 25 miles an hour. Temperature mid-teens. I am wearing a one-piece fleece garment from ankles to wrists. On top of that, I have expedition weight long john bottoms, a fleece full-length top, and a fleece vest on top of that. And on top of all that, I have a full dry suit with zippers all zipped up. I've got expedition weight neoprene socks under expedition weight neoprene booties. I have a hat and gloves for land that I will exchange for the Tuilik and the PFD when I get to the water, and some neoprene mittens as well. I wheel my kayak down the sidewalk to wait for the trolley. First trolley comes, I don't get on. Well, that's a given. Trolley to subway to bus, moving kind of slow so I don't overheat. In suiting up for the water, when I put the PFD on, I buckle the buckles, top and bottom, but I leave the zipper unzipped. And that is because if I zip it up, it'll freeze into one solid strip of ice, and I won't be able to get it off. I can get the buckles unbuckled if I have to melt them with the hand warmer, but the zipper would be more trouble, so I just leave the zipper unzipped. Big sheets of ice are floating down the Delaware River, but fortunately the wind is blowing them to the other shore, giving me enough open water to practice rolling in. First, I paddle up and down the river a little bit just to feel out the water. And I've got my Norsok, my throwing stick, on the deck, because I'll need that to do some of the rolls in the competition list. And I have to move the Norsok around a little bit from time to time to keep it from freezing solidly onto the deck of the kayak. I'm also finding that the ice is forming rather quickly on parts of my paddle. So I took the Norsok to try to bang some of the ice off the paddle, but the ice was so hard already it broke the tip off the Norsok. I start rolling, and in this point in my paddling career, I've probably already done 1,000 rolls in my life, so it just comes naturally. I can practically do it in my sleep. My core is fairly warm. I've got plenty of things covering that. Fingers, face, and maybe the backs of my heels are feeling the cold, so my face is getting numb, so it's not even feeling it. But I am finding that with each roll, the ice is building up so fast on every wet surface that I decided after 10 rolls, maybe I'll end for the day. Coming back to land, I managed to get the Tuilik off of the rim of the cockpit. It hasn't frozen on so bad that I can't break the ice off. I get out and I switch from the neoprene mittens to some land gloves quickly so that wind doesn't get to my fingers. I can take the kayak apart with gloves. I've done that many times before. I managed to get it apart without anything freezing stuck together. The buckles and the PFD come off easily enough, just breaking through the ice on that. And the zipper's not a problem because I haven't zipped it up in the first place. But I do find that my VHF radio on the PFD, I can't turn it off because the volume knob is one solid chunk of ice. So I just leave it on. Takes a bit of effort to get the Tuilik off my head. It goes on like a hoodie, and coming off, it's all solid like a suit of armor. It doesn't stretch around my head, so I have to break the ice on that and try to wiggle through it. Had a lot of funny looks on the bus until the icicles melted out of my beard. There were still some rolls on the competition list I was working on, but temperature-wise, I figured I was ready for Greenland. Well, my training continued February into March. Spring arrived, got warmer. Didn't have to bring the mittens or the hand warmers with me, and I could start using a wetsuit instead of a dry suit. I built up a wide selection of paddling attire that I could pick and choose from to match the conditions. Here's a tip from me on paddling clothing. Let's say you started kayaking and you have a kayak and a paddle, PFD spray skirt, and maybe it's August, you've enjoyed the warm summer days and warm water as well, and you want to extend the season a bit, so you're in the market for something to accomplish that. And there's wetsuits and dry suits and short wetsuits and long wetsuits and all variety of things. My recommendation is the first thing you want to get is a Farmer John 3 to 3.5 millimeter wetsuit. Farmer John's the one with no sleeves. It just goes around the shoulder and then it's all the way down to the ankles. If you get a short one for warmer weather, it won't be warm enough for the colder stuff. And if you get like a full long sleeve one, it'll be too hot. So your basic building block is a Farmer John 3 millimeter wetsuit. Now, if a 2 millimeter one, that's you can get that later. That's too light. You want the 3.5 millimeter Farmer John. It might be a little warm or a little cool sometimes, but that's what you start with. Then from there, you can work on building up your other options with both heavier weight and lighter weight things. Farmer John 3 or 3.5 millimeter wetsuit. Get one that fits properly. Shouldn't cost you more than $200, and you can expect that to last at least 10 years. And a safety tip is to always paddle with someone else. Don't paddle by yourself. Now, obviously, I have not followed that, but I have addressed that concern. See, I found after years of paddling that I was just never took to racing, just wasn't into paddling for speed, just somehow didn't appeal to me. And it took me some time to figure out why that was. It's because I found I was instinctively always overdressed for the conditions, because there's a characteristic of hypothermia in that as the core temperature goes down, the body, in trying to continue to function, will shut off the blood to the extremities so that the heart can still keep beating. That takes blood away from your head and impairs your mental facilities so you can't think straight. In a group, you have other people to watch out for the warning signs, but by yourself, you got to be ready to take your own action. You need to either drink something hot or put more clothing on or paddle faster to warm yourself up. Okay, I described for you what it's like to paddle a kayak and roll a kayak when the temperature is down in the teens. Imagine, if you will, doing that on a daily basis, because your life and your family's life depends on it. That is what seal hunters in Greenland did every day. And they did not have neoprene, polyester fleece, Gore-Tex, or latex gaskets. These were some very tough dudes in a very dangerous activity. It was not uncommon for a hunter to head out in the morning in his kayak and never be seen again. You can imagine that one could get superstitious in that situation. In the museums in Greenland, inside the kayak, sometimes at the end, you'll find amulets. Some of the ornamentation found on kayaks and hunting gear in the museums doesn't appear to have any practical use, but you can bet it's there for a reason. I've been fortunate enough to hear directly from an old seal hunter stories about some freaky things that happened out on the high seas in a kayak. About the third or fourth time I went to the Greenland competition, I wanted to compete in rolling the way they do, in a real skin-on-frame kayak and using a real sealskin Tuilik. So to borrow one, a sealskin Tuilik is a very special item and rather expensive to make. So the clubs may only have 2 or 3 of them, and they all share them. Well, I found somebody who would lend me one and a kayak to fit it, a skin-on-frame kayak. And during the rolling competition, they pulled it aside when it was time for me to use it, and I had to take it around the far side of the harbor. This was in Utaqqivunga in South Greenland, to where you could get down to the water, where people would put their kayaks in the water. And so to put on a sealskin Tuilik, sealskin does not stretch like neoprene. So it was like the frozen one when I was paddling at 15 degrees. The Tuilik was as stiff as that. And so I could put it up over my head, and then I had to pull it down and trying to stretch it over my face, mashing my nose down just to get the thing on was difficult. And so I was standing there with this thing over my head, pulling it, trying to get into it, had my arms up almost through out to the hands, but just trying to wiggle into it. And there was hands appeared. I felt hands on my shoulders, very nice, somebody helping me to get it on and slide it down. So I managed to push my head all the way up through the face hole and got my chin up in there. And then I turned around, and I am not kidding. There was no one there. There wasn't anyone standing anywhere near me. I got a song about a seal hunter's wife waiting for her husband to come home. And this is from an earlier era of Greenlandic music, 1992. Vocalist name is Mariina, M-A-R-I-I-N-A. She put out quite a few records back then and was quite popular. The song is called Utaqqivunga, which is I Am Waiting. And lyrics in general go, she's watching the ocean, hoping to see her husband again. When he finally comes into sight, the proud kayaker with a good catch. Utaqqivunga.
Isiarusa tuapok avamiyunak isigaluni imasuak kisihat alasanagulu neriyutaka tuapok anore suastikat somat uinit kingumut tikikumasasok Utaqqivunga neriyushdunga tikisasutit uanut kingumut sapilenanga nukituvunga kinatuashdunga sulimanamut Avananiginak nuivok kayavisuhak kalishduni sasumap anata payogusuinik tikile amat atefiopa kipile figi simashdugu niusok ekishdugu okafiga ima Utaqqigama neriyushdunga tikisasutit uanut kingumut sapilenanga nukitugama kinatuashdunga sulimanamut Utaqqigama neriyushdunga tikisasutit uanut kingumut sapilenanga nukitugama kinatuashdunga sulimanamut
Well, Mariina put out several CDs in her career, and that recorded version of that song, she sings just the choruses, which is the voice of the hunter's wife, and a male voice sings the hunter's voice lines of the verses. Mariina had a long hiatus in her career, but in 2011 she was making something of a comeback. And that year I was in Ilulissat and Maligiaq. Alerted me to the fact that she was performing in a bar, so I had a chance to see her. And she's got that kind of voice that you describe it as. She sings like a bird. You can hear that on the CDs quite to good effect. But in order for you to hear that, you are going to have to find her music online. She recorded for ULO Music, ULO Music. And her name is Mariina, Mariina. And this is the title track of the CD, Utaqqivunga. That wraps up my portion of DUBCAST number 5. Coming up in number 6, got a few more Philadelphia adventures to relate. I'll tell you about the time I had to call the Coast Guard. And if you want a head start, you might want to review the kayak song from DUBCAST 1 and 2. Might work best to start with small, attainable goals. So how about the first syllable of the kayak song? The first syllable is ooh. Like ooh, ooh. That's the kayak song, okay? Think you can remember that? Ooh. Until then, this is Dubside signing off of the DUBCAST.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. If you'd like to learn more about Freya Hoffmeister, Goddess of Love to the Seas, or the National Center for Cold Water Safety, please check out this week's show notes. I also have a link to Mariina's Utaqqivunga CD. As always, if you enjoyed this podcast, let us know what you think and drop us an email at dubcastwithdubside@gmail.com.